I'm Janice Ellig, CEO of the Ellig Group, and I'm delighted to be hosting today's webinar, the third in a series which we are going to be providing, which has come about from our clients, our candidates, and our colleagues who've really asked questions about what to lead, how to manage, how to get on the board, what's happening in these very turbulent, unprecedented times. So today we're going to hear from two experts on the subject of board ready, new opportunities for a new reality. And I wanted to say that I have spent half of my career in corporate America and the other half in the executive search world. And I've seen what has happened in boardrooms and in the C-suite and how the changes have occurred in terms of the talent that's needed. With regard to getting women on boards at Ellig Group, for the past 3 years when I relaunched my company under the name of Ellig Group, we reached out and had seminars and conference calls monthly with women who were looking to get onto boards. And we talked to them about how to network, how to put their board profile together, how to really go out there with their brand, with their profile and what they stood for. So we're going to really today bring all of that together with two experts on how to position yourself in this new reality when boards will be looking to, I believe, refresh themselves probably now more than ever before. So it's my pleasure to be introducing first Nicole Sanford, who leads Ellig Group's board advisory services work, which includes working with CEOs and boards on executive searches, skill development, succession planning, and all governance issues that boards and CEOs are faced with today. She spent the prior 3 decades at Deloitte in charge of the regulatory and operational risk practice, and she was a founding member of their governance practice as well. So I'm so thrilled to have Nicole with the Ellig Group today. Also joining us is Debbie McCormack, Managing Director of the Deloitte Center for Board Effectiveness, where she works with executives, boards, and others active in the governance area to provide them with the resources that they need pertaining to the current board issues that they're facing and government trends. So I welcome both of you today to join us in a great conversation. And we've already gotten several questions in, so we're going to have a very active interaction here. So why don't we start with Nicole about this new reality that we've spoken about and what boards may be looking for and how is it going to change in terms of what boards may be looking for in terms of technology, digital skills, and overall, an intellectual curiosity about how do we go forward.
Right. Thank you, Janice. I think when we look back over the last several decades, we've had crises before, nothing of the magnitude or of what we're looking at today, but we have had a cycle of crises. And in each case, we've come out on the other side and realized that there were significant gaps in the skill sets of the boards of directors that were charged with overseeing companies during those crises. Back in the early 2000s, after the Enron scandal and all the cascading effects that happened after that, the gap was independence and financial literacy. Fast forward to the financial crisis, which has largely fueled the last decade's worth of developments in board space. It was industry expertise. It was risk management expertise. I think a lot of board members on financial services companies felt a little flat-footed and ill-equipped to understand the complex nature of the business and the relationships. So there was a heavy focus on getting people who really had the deep industry expertise. And we're certainly going to find new gaps on the other side of this pandemic, no question. I won't try to predict all of them, but I could imagine a situation where boards are looking for more depth around the economic, global economy and economic understanding, global supply chain. You mentioned also technology, not only in terms of opportunities, but also in terms of better ways to stay on top of and in touch with what's actually happening in the business. I can see situations where all of those skills, which is of course great news for first-time directors and the non-CEOs, which is often a great source of diversity candidates. I think there are also going to be some situations where the board does a post-mortem on how they work together and had how that either did or did not support a highly functioning, collaborative, supportive, but appropriately challenging group of overseers. I could imagine scenarios where if you have a board that's stacked with all current or former CEOs, you might be having a little bit of trouble getting the collaboration that you're looking for in these circumstances. A lot of people trying to take control, I'm sure of it. So on the other side, boards are going to do a diagnosis of what went well, what didn't go well. And when I work with a board, I always encourage people, chairman and nominating committee, governance committee chairs, to look at filling those gaps in a couple of different ways. First could be around educating and developing skills of the existing board. A second would be around finding an advisor to have on retainer to support the board in situations like, hopefully we never have another situation like we're living through today, but to have someone on retainer at the ready from a crisis perspective to support the board might be another way. But absolutely, I think we're going to see as boards go forward and start looking at nominating new directors, they're going to be looking for different skill sets today than they were before to improve the dynamics and also to make it possible for them to really understand what's happening in a global crisis like what we're facing. But I'd love to hear Debbie's insights as well.
This is a time for boards to reflect, right? To look at who they have, their composition, who's on the board, do they have the skill sets that we need going forward? Because that strategic plan, Debbie, for that company could be changing, right? As you're working with your colleagues and your clients, they're changing. So maybe the boards of today need to be changing somewhat for tomorrow.
Absolutely. And thank you, Janice, and thank you, Nicole. I'm delighted to be here with you today. You know, I've been speaking to some of the heads of strategy, and one of them on Friday was telling me that they had just recently had their strategy approved, and that now has been thrown out the door as of March 15th because so many changes has come along, and they are working very closely with the board right now for trying to figure out what their new assumptions are and what their new scenarios are. And Nicole, what you're talking about is exactly right. Not only about making sure that the board is properly engaged, but does the board have time to be engaged right now? There's questions out there, I know, where the board members are on more than one board, and now the board meetings are all suddenly at the same time as they're going from 5 board meetings a year to board meetings that are every week. And how do they keep up with management so that they can spend this amount of time? And as our candidates who are on the line with us today are really thinking about the time that they have to spend in being a board member, it's also the question of how do they make sure that when something like a crisis happens, they're going to be able to spend time perhaps at their own company to deal with the crisis if they're a current executive, as well as at their board, or if they're on the board of more than one company, how they manage that to make sure that they do have those continued robust discussions and the ability to help one another. So Janice, your comment on board composition being very important right now and being something that they're focusing on, I think is spot on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when you look at, we've always, as you would just say, you can be so, even now 2 or 3 boards you can be overboarded with because the schedules are set. You're no longer just, 6 times or 8 times, you may be on all weekend. And so that may have boards looking again at, do we need to not have as many individuals who maybe are always C-suite, but maybe some functional experts, like a cybersecurity expert, right? Who is functional expertise or a technology expert, who is not yet on a board, but as we in the search business say, they are under the radar candidates, executives that would be so good for a board, but we've always gone to that COO or CEO. And so now is the time, Debbie and Nicole, to sort of take a look at what those individuals could offer to a board?
I say yes, especially you're thinking about the cyber and the tech savvy board member. Boards right now are finding that there are many bad actors out there who don't want to waste a good crisis. And so they are finding that the negative cyber activity is increased as we've gone into the pandemic and what we're going through right now. And having someone who can continue to help provide that right level of oversight for management and also provide oversight and help with the robust discussions at the board level is very important. So the individuals who have that technology experience, the CIOs, the CISOs, those individuals right now we are seeing are more in demand and more wanted by the board members themselves, so that they also have someone there who is not only understanding the discussions at the moment as we're going through this moment by moment, but also then we'll be able to help oversee when we start the recovery period for what we're doing now, but even growing in the strategies that the companies are coming up with and how they continue on the growth strategy that they had. I was speaking with one CIO recently who's very interested in board service, but has found that within their own company, they are now the CFO of IT, because IT now is no longer just, you know, that $1 amount on the balance sheet or the income statement that they're trying to spend. This is how now they are going to go forward and be successful for the whole company growth strategy. So it's becoming more and more important on the boards. Nicole, I don't know what you're seeing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I actually think that this is a really exciting time, because this is happening at a time when we are seeing more first-time directors than ever before. We're seeing, at least at Ellig, we're seeing our clients who maybe came to us to place their first diverse candidate come back and say, that's the best director we have. Find me more of those people. So there's some momentum around opening the boardroom door that happened even before the crisis. Now combine that with everything we're talking about here, I think we're going to see, you know, maybe this is the burning platform that helps us get over that marginal growth every year and really make some true progress.
So we had a question that came in from the audience, a wonderful colleague of mine, and she asked, so given, you know, in the financial crisis, it was all about finance, right? Mm-hmm. Now it's really a lot about people and business continuity plans. So will there be more of a need or demand for those great chief HR officers, those SHROs as we call them, to now be on boards to really look at, you know, business continuity plans today? You know, they didn't contemplate, a lot of them didn't, working so remotely for so long, and technology having to, you know, assist in all of how work was going to get done. So do you see that happening?
Yeah, I can't see how it wouldn't, right? I mean, we've seen an elevation of the talent strategy in most large companies already, where, you know, maybe in the past, certain functional roles might have been marginalized, and that is not the case for human capital and human resources right now. This whole conversation about workforce of the future, well, it turns out the future was a lot sooner than we thought, and the way that people work changed overnight instead of over years. But people who have experience with that are going to be highly valued, for sure. I think, Debbie, I don't know how you feel about it, but.
Nicole, I think you are not only spot on, but I think we are seeing it more today than ever. The talent strategies that are out there and the challenges that we've had, you know, look back 6 weeks ago, we were at such low unemployment rates. Right now, we know the unemployment rates are very high. How does the board help oversee the right people coming back at the right time and making sure that they have that talent still? And how do they go after the talent that they may have lost and replace that? And with the board oversight that's needed around this and really thinking about what that workforce of the future looks like, I think the CHRO, the head of talent, those roles are going to be, again, even more than were needed before. And it's interesting as you think about your interest on boards and where you want to be, we often tell people to think about what committee they're interested in being on, because we know that the work of the board is really done through the committees. And CHROs, you know, having the talent that they've done from a recruiting standpoint, really understand the processes then about the board composition and can help weigh in there with the NomGov committee. But they can also really weigh in on what's going on from the compensation committee and all of the work that goes on there. So the CHROs can be very, very helpful at both of these committees and really add value then to the management teams that they're helping oversee.
So our audience also asks, technology has been a focus today. Can you please comment on demand for risk management skills?
Nicole, do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Edit it up.
Well, as someone who is also seeking a board membership, I'm pretty excited to hear that that's the case. But we've been seeing that for some time, right? That was a really big push after the financial crisis of really having people who understand how to better assess the risk management plan that's put in front of the board. You can teach someone an awful lot about how to oversee risk management, but it is helpful to have somebody who really knows the difference between a good plan and a bad plan, the difference between a strong risk management response program and a not so great one. That helps to help. It can help a company to oversee. But I do think it's another one of those gaps that can be, for some companies, filled just by having some good advisors. A plug for your folks, my old folks and your folks now, Debbie. But I do think you don't always need to have somebody on the board. But if you have a well-rounded individual who also happens to be a great risk manager, that's the holy grail.
So let's move on to, so the audience is out there and they're looking at, okay, so what are the opportunities for me? How do I position myself potentially for that board role, maybe at the end of this year, beginning of the next proxy season? I have a network out there. Is it appropriate for me to tap into that network? Suppose I know people in these companies at the executive level and the board level. Do I reach out to them? They're busy. How do I do this? It's not like saying, hey, let's have a coffee, Mary. You can't do that today, but you could do a coffee over the phone. But how does one reach out in a good way?
So there's so many opportunities here. And, we tell people that your network is 70 to 80% of the time how you are going to get that board seat. And this is something that's very important. You have been working your entire career on, bringing together your reputation for being someone of integrity, somebody who is a very hard worker, somebody who's good in a crisis. You have the talents that you've brought forth and been working very hard on. And so your network likely knows you the best. But what they don't know is they probably don't know that you're interested in board service. And there's a couple different ways that you might want to really consider bringing that story forth and making this come alive. One of the ways that we talk about often at Deloitte is through your board bio, which is different than a resume. It's a one-page document. You've got your photo, you've got your information on there themed about some of the skills and experiences that you would bring to the board. But it also then allows you in a very easy piece of paper to do just what Janice has said, to share it with someone and say, you know what, I would love to talk to you about the fact that I'm interested in getting on a board, but I thought I would just send you my bio. Would you give me some feedback on it? And I personally have never met anyone to say no, that they would not be delighted to give you feedback. But more than that, then you're also helping them realize that this is something that you're very serious about and very interested in. And because many of you actually know board members, getting in touch with those board members and having them take a look at that for you is one opportunity that I would suggest that you take, and then also have that follow-up discussion about this is something that you're interested in and get their takes on where you may be able to really add value. Nicole, I know you've got a lot of thoughts about networking.
Yeah, yes, I do. And I think that one of the things that people can be doing now, and maybe there's never been a better time to do this, but take stock and some inventory around what you're passionate about, where your interests lie, and recalibrate, why do I want to be on a board? Just reassess that, and then have that as sort of the first part of your thinking. What am I passionate about? How do I want to spend my time going forward? I'm sure I'm not the only one who's rethinking all of those things about, the big picture. What kind of impact do I want to have on the world? Then start looking for how those, the skills that you have and the special experiences that you have that we've all been talking about so far, how can I marry those up to find companies that, or at least industry sectors, stage of growth type companies, where do those things intersect? So a target list, so to speak. It's not going to be perfect. It's never going to be perfect. But then if you can find some folks that are connected to those companies or to those industries that are in your network, you can have a pretty robust conversation about, I'm going through this exercise to figure out what kind of company would be most interested in me, and how does that align with the companies that I'm most interested in. And I can tell you from experience that directors are more than happy to give you input, especially that's the best part of being someone who represents diversity looking for a board. There's so many wonderful men and women out there who are very actively putting a hand out to pull you up. Take advantage of that, I think. And I think you just have to be sensitive to the depth and the warmth of your relationship. Probably not the best time to be cold calling people. But if it's someone that you have a good relationship with, I don't see any reason why you can't have a cup of coffee with them on Zoom and talk about your thinking.
This is a very interesting question, because whether you're about to go on a board or you're on a board, this person says, I'm reluctant as a new board member to push for more communication from management during this crisis, but I don't feel that I'm getting enough information about the company at the present time. What's your advice? This is important.
I've got one for that, if you don't mind, Debbie, and then you can jump in.
Yeah.
I think one way to handle that is to ask the corporate secretary or whoever is providing you the information, what other data and analysis is management looking at to assess this issue, whatever the issue is that you feel like you're not getting enough information, and ask them how they can repurpose or boil down that data that they're already producing and they're already looking at. You definitely your sensitivity is right. You don't want to be asking people to be creating anything. And certainly if the management team doesn't need it to manage the crisis, you probably don't need it to oversee the crisis. But there is additional depth that probably could be provided. It's entirely possible that the board, the corporate secretary of management is sensitive to overwhelming you with detail. But that is a critical part of your role as a board member. And if you don't feel like you're getting what you need, you can probably get it without asking anybody to really do anything more than just pull it out and send it to you, and the rest of the board for that matter. And your fellow board members will probably be really happy that you did, because if you're not the only one, almost entirely sure that you're not the only one feeling that way.
You probably are not the only one feeling that way. And one thing that you might do, in addition to what Nicole has recommended, which is terrific advice, is to also reach out to your either lead independent director or the chairman of the board, just to say, hey, there's additional information that I would like, not trying to put, additional work right now on the management team. So trying to get that, what's existing already is perfect, but just letting them know that this is something that you're interested in, on what the topic is, so that the lead independent director is aware as well, because you never know if they are getting more data than what you are, and they may be able to share something with you straight away. So it's a really good question, Janice.
Yeah, and I think that, at the end of the day, the fiduciary responsibility resides with the board to make sure that they get the information so they can make the proper decisions. So if you need further advice, I'm sure Nicole would like to answer that for you. So there's a few other questions here. I'm going to combine them. They're asking about the marketing expertise, digital expertise. Will that be needed? Is that needed? Do you see that even more so going forward? When you listen to Eric Schmidt of Google the other day being interviewed by the Economic Club and saying, these information companies, we're going to be able to tell you so much about your health on your phone. We're going to be able to do so much more in terms of predicting a pandemic. So information, technology, and marketing and communications and all of those skills. Do you think that that is also going to increase, or have you seen that, Debbie?
So, when I started with the Center for Board Effectiveness 5 years ago, we set up an opportunities database. So we are not a search firm. We work with companies like your Ellig Group with Nicole and Janice, and we give them names of, as well as individuals who we think would be good for board positions. But our clients are often asking us, do you know someone who? And I'll be very honest with you, we get a lot of questions around, do we know someone who has digital transformation and digital expertise? Because that is something that the board would like more information on. And the way that they're looking at it, again, is all around the growth. How does the board help with the strategic plan to help grow the company? And how can this board member help support that and provide that robust discussion and ask those really difficult questions sometimes, and also understand the difficult answers that management is giving? And so how can they do that? So I do think that there is definitely a role for someone who has marketing experience, but I'm going to share with you something that Harry Kramer shared with me very early on. And Harry is the former CEO of Baxter, and he's on a number of boards. And he would always tell me, Debbie, it's great for someone to lead with what their title is. He says, but I'm even more impressed when the person talks about how much they supported the CEO and the development of the strategy and the execution of the strategy of the company. And oh, by the way, they were also, and you can fill in the blank, they were also the chief marketing officer. They were also the chief information officer. They were also, and had that other role, but their biggest and best role was the one where they supported the CEO and the company and the strategy and what they were trying to accomplish.
That's great. Yeah, those are the pieces of advice that you get along the way that really help you, get you into the role. So there's a question here about 30 years, and it's in a particular area. What can I do to seek a board position in an industry sector that is outside of my expertise? This individual happens to be in global investment management, is currently sits on a mutual fund board, is that person's first board role. So that's a bit tricky going outside of your area of expertise for that next role. What would be your advice there?
I would say that it really will depend on finding a board that is looking for something a little different, right? So no board wants to have the entire board from a single industry. That's not a great way to oversee the company. So I think looking at companies that have a need for the special skills and experiences that you have from that experience, but I don't see that as a barrier at all. I've never seen when I work with great boards, they always have a mix of people who are from the industry and who are outside of the industry. And sometimes the best questions come from the person who doesn't know the industry because they're not afraid to say, I don't get this. And most boards, experienced board members recognize that. I don't think that should be a barrier in my view.
And this is somebody who's already on a first board. So you've got good corporate governance experience, so it should be easier. Typically, when you're going in your first board, you kind of stick to something that you're really known for and you have an expertise in there. You can be an all-around great athlete. And as one CEO said to me, I don't care what industry they come from because I don't know where we're going to go strategically down the road. And this is in the insurance business. So I want an all-around great athlete. I thought, well, that's a great search to be doing. Right? But typically they do want something that pertains to the strategic direction of that company. So for the first board, I say sort of stick to what you know best. Would you agree with that, Debbie? Or
I do. The one thing that I would add is that as you pull together your experience, industry experience is just one of the tools that you have in your toolkit. So make sure that you think about those specific things that are on some of the skills matrices that are part of some of the proxies that you may go in and read where they're looking for international experience, they're looking for M&A experience, they're looking for, you can kind of tick down and see the specific things that they may look for and think about what you have done and where those skills and experiences are going to translate to any of the industries. And I think then you'll also find what Nicole so eloquently put in the very beginning about where your passions are and what you want to support. And the merge of those two, I think, would be very beneficial then for both the board and for you.
So we're going to end with this question, and then I'm going to point out something that's on our website. The chicken and egg issue of your first board. If you haven't been on a board, how do you get on a board? And if you don't have that board experience, or do you have some board experience from maybe being on a major not-for-profit where corporate governance, is really practiced. I was on the New York City YMCA board with Barry Salzberg, your CEO, global CEO, right? And I followed him as chair. I learned good corporate governance from Barry Salzberg when he was there. So how do companies weigh that, Debbie, in terms of, not having that board experience, corporate board experience yet?
So with so many of the new things that have happened lately, right? Not only the BRT statement, which is fairly new, the California legislation, even the Fearless Girl, people are starting to really realize that we do need new board members and we do need new thoughts and ideas in the boardroom. And so many companies are more open to bringing in the new board members. And if you look at some of the statistics that are out there, a third of the board members who were added to the Fortune 500 last year were even new people. And so there will always be those openings and those spots. I think that, Janice, your point about the not-for-profit service is definitely something that can be very helpful, but it's also helpful if you're a really good board member, as I'm sure you were with Barry on that large of a board, because they also see how you act in the boardroom and what you do, and then you can really go back to that network. And those individuals can also help you find some of your opportunities for future boards that are public or private companies.
And Nicole, you would just close on that. So the network that one may have in a not-for-profit or with your foundation board, I mean, it's all, you know, it's having those skills, but it's also having that connection with people, being a collaborative player, right? Somebody who's strategically, who you can count on, right, for good judgment. Talk a little bit about what we call the softer skills, but are really important, particularly during times like this.
Right, right. Well, I will say, I always tell people when they ask me about nonprofit board service, the only reason to join a nonprofit board is because you're absolutely passionate about the mission. Because if you are, that will translate into your effectiveness. It'll show up in the way you show up. You'll be a far better board member if it's something that you really believe in. And it may or may not lead to a corporate board. And you can't join a large not-for-profit board if the only reason you're interested is because you want to network with the other people on the board. It just doesn't work that way. So, you know, if you're passionate about the organization, you show up in a way that is really appreciated. And then after you get to know these folks, and this is why we always say, Janice and Debbie, we always tell people, it takes time. You have to be patient and you have to put in the time. Because once you get to know the other board members, the other trustees, depending on the structure, then you can reach out like we talked about earlier. It's a warm relationship. It's a relationship that you can leverage, but it all comes out of how did you perform, and did you show up, and did you put your heart and soul into the mission? That's what people remember.
I wanted to add that we have 3 videos on the Ellig Group website, which shows 3 women talking about how they got on their first board. I think there are lessons to be learned there. Nicole, you and I participated at the Yale program led by Professor Jeffrey Sonnenfeld. You know, there are many ways to get yourselves prepared for board work and be a great board director. We are available. We'll also answer any questions that you have in writing back to those of you who have participated. So are there any parting comments that either of you want to make before we close the webinar? It's been great. Thank you.
Well, I'll give a plug for Debbie and the Deloitte team for the Center for Board Effectiveness. The resources that you guys put out and that you find to distribute are usually very high quality, top shelf, and sort of required reading for anybody, and you can subscribe to that. So I won't make you do that. And then there are a number of books that if you have time and you're looking to brush up, I have 3 books. I piled them up right here. We're going to put them in the chat box, but Boards That Deliver by Ram Charan is definitely something I'd take the time to read right now. Business Chemistry, great book if you can get your hands on it. And of course, you mentioned Jeff Sonnenfeld. He put out a great book after the Enron scandals called Leadership and Governance from the Inside Out. Also great reading. So we're going to put those in the chat box and just keep this. Oh, and I also just signed up myself for the cyber course on NACD's website because they're doing everything virtual now. Usually I think you have to show up for some pieces of these courses, but they're all virtual. Debbie, anything else?
That's right. So I have a book too, The Perfect Corporate Board, which is by Adam Epstein, and it's all about the small and mid-cap type companies. You know, there's a number of companies that are not in the Fortune 500, 1,000 that are looking for terrific board members and not only want the new board members and want that help, but they need very specific experiences and skills. And so really, it's a terrific book. And I think it's something that as you start to think about what type of board you're interested in, it will help really expand your thinking.
So we will put this webinar on my website, and Debbie, we will also make sure that people have your contact information so that they can come to you if they need your advice and counsel. I want to thank you both very, very much. I think it was very informative, insightful, and informational. So for everybody here, thank you so much. And stay tuned. Next week, we will be doing another webinar with Johnny Taylor, CEO of SHRM, and that it will be focused on the changing role of the HR leader in these turbulent times. So to the question that was asked earlier about, will HR have a role on the board? I think so, yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. Have a good day, everybody. Stay safe, stay well.